When Emily first saw Labubu, she felt nothing unusual. It was just a strange toy on the shelf of an old shop in Portland, nestled between two antique stores. She was 29, searching for unusual props for a photo shoot. Emily worked as a stylist and sometimes a photographer, always drawn to items with history, old lace, faded postcards, porcelain dolls with cracks on their faces. The shopkeeper, a man in his 60s with pale eyes and a colorless smile, placed the doll on the counter when Emily asked for something rare. "This is Labubu." "Very rare," he said, as if speaking a name that should never be spoken aloud. The doll was indeed strange. Small, with a huge head resembling a forest creature. Pale hair, thin limbs instead of arms, and eyes, not glass, like ordinary dolls, but seemingly alive. Cloudy, gray-blue, with a wet shine. Emily couldn't explain why she decided to buy it. Perhaps because the shopkeeper had stared at her for too long, unblinking, as if waiting for something. Perhaps because inside that innocent face, there was a sense of unease, as if the doll was waiting for someone to take her home. She paid in cash. The shopkeeper gave no receipt, merely wrapping Labubu in old newspaper and saying, "Don't place her in front of mirrors." Emily laughed. She always found people's habit of giving antiques curses amusing. That evening she brought the doll home. Her small apartment in an old building on the outskirts was filled with light. Emily loved big windows and the smell of coffee. She placed Labubu on the dresser next to the camera, checked the lighting, and took a few photos. On the screen, the doll looked different. Her eyes reflected the light as if someone was sitting inside, looking out. The next morning, when Emily woke up, the doll was no longer on the dresser but on the windowsill. She didn't remember moving it there. She decided she must have done it in her sleep, after wine. But within 3 days, the oddities intensified. In the photo she took for a new project, a shadow began to appear, a tiny figure with Labubu's head. Sometimes behind models, sometimes next to mirrors. Emily checked everything, camera settings, lens, reflections. Nothing. Yet in every new shot, the same silhouette appeared. That evening she decided to put the doll back in its box. But when she opened the lid, a coldness like a refrigerator draft wafted out. At the bottom lay an old faded postcard. It showed a child holding a doll, the very same one. Only the child's eyes were painted over black. A week later, sounds began. At first faint, as if someone were walking barefoot across the apartment. Then whispers. Barely audible, as if someone were speaking underwater. Emily tried to ignore it. She was rational, tired, and chalked it up to stress. But at night, waking up, she saw Labubu standing at the head of her bed. Her eyes reflected the streetlight, as if alive. She cursed, turned on the light, grabbed the doll, and threw it in the trash outside. The next morning, the doll was back on the dresser. Dirty face, torn newspaper, the same one used in the shop. Emily began filming everything with her camera. She set up a recorder for the night. Nothing happened on the recording. Until 3 a.m. Then came a rustling. The camera shook slightly, focus shifting. And then, a quiet laugh. Childlike, but hoarse and hollow. In the final frame, Emily saw the doll slowly turn its head toward the lens. She drove back to the antique store. The old shop was gone, just an empty space with dust and broken windows. A neighboring shopkeeper said it had been closed for 10 years. Emily showed a photo from her phone, taken when she bought the doll. The counter, the shelves, the shopkeeper. The neighbor went pale. That's Mr. Holt. He died in 2012. Burned down with the shop. That evening, Emily went to her friends in Seattle. She left the doll at home, covered with a towel. 2 days later, neighbors called the police. The apartment smelled of smoke. Firefighters found Emily's apartment completely burned. The only item left untouched was the doll. Clean, eyes intact. When her friend arrived to identify the body, a police officer mentioned that the camera survived. On the flash drive was one recording, that night. On the footage, Emily sits on the bed, crying. Behind her stands the doll. It moves. Slowly raises its head, then an arm, and touches her shoulder. Emily screams. Camera falls. Then the same whisper Emily had heard before, "You brought me home." The video cuts. After Emily's funeral, her younger sister Sarah took the belongings. She arrived from Denver to handle the estate and sell the burned apartment. Firefighters found only a metal box with jewelry, a photo album, a couple of flash drives, and the doll. Labubu sat at the edge of the ashes, dusty but intact. Her eyes gleamed as if she had just stepped out of rain. Sarah didn't know what to do with the doll. Touching it made her shiver, but she couldn't throw it away. She put it in a box in her car trunk, planning to dispose of it later. On the drive home, she was haunted by the feeling someone was in the back seat. In the mirror, she saw only the bundle with the doll. Yet occasionally, it seemed to move slightly as the car turned. At home, Sarah didn't unpack the boxes for days. She constantly felt someone was in the apartment. At night, she heard quiet footsteps in the living room, though she owned no cat. On the third day, she finally opened the box. The doll was the same, but a fine crack appeared on her face, like a smile. Sarah shivered, assuming it was always there. She placed Labubu on a shelf in the hallway, intending to throw her away in the morning. That night, she woke to a scratching sound, slow, deliberate, as if testing if she was awake. Sarah lay still. The sound continued. She turned on the light, and it stopped. The next morning, the bedroom door was scratched. Sarah tried to research the doll's history. She scoured internet forums, blogs, and collector groups. On Reddit, she found a post about strange dolls made by an artist named Charles Morrow, who lived in Portland in the early 2000s. Labubu was part of a limited series, only 6 made. Comments grew eerie. People reported dolls disappearing, breathing at night. One read, "Don't keep it near mirrors. It remembers faces." Sarah recalled the mirror in Emily's room, near the bed. She decided to take the doll to an antique store to get rid of it. The Denver shop smelled musty and damp. Masks, broken statuettes, and cracked figurines lined the shelves. The elderly owner, a white-haired man in glasses, went pale when he saw Labubu. "Where did you find this?" he asked softly. Sarah explained about her sister and the fire. He removed his glasses, shaking his head. These dolls were made by Moro. He didn't sell them, only gave them to the chosen few. They say he left part of a soul in each. Not his own, someone else's. Sarah laughed nervously. What do you mean? He worked with photos of dead children, taking images of living kids and crafting their faces into dolls, he explained. Sarah paled. After Moro disappeared, police found dozens of photos in his studio. All of the children from those images went missing. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room staring at the doll. Labubu stood motionless, but her eyes reflected the faint TV light. Occasionally, the pupils seemed to move, just slightly. Sarah set up Emily's old camera, pointed at the doll, and started recording, then went to bed. At dawn, she noticed the camera was off. The battery had drained, though fully charged the night before. The video lasted 17 minutes. First 10 were uneventful. Then the frame shifted slightly. The doll's head slowly turned toward the lens. In the reflection of the glass appeared a child's face, pale, with tear tracks under the eyes, the same cracked smile. Sarah called the police, suspecting an intruder. No prints, no break-ins. An officer noticed the doll on the floor near the stairs. "Do you have a child?" he asked. "No," said Sarah. Then he frowned. "Then why is she holding a toy car?" Sarah looked down. In the doll's hands was a small metal car, identical to one her brother had as a child before he died. At night, Sarah woke to children's laughter. Initially thinking it was a dream, she then heard a whisper, "You left her alone." In the mirror, a small figure with a doll's head appeared. It smiled. The new family moved in that October. A warm autumn, windows open, wind carrying the smell of wet leaves. 5-year-old Claire adapted quickly. She spent much time in the basement, fascinated by boxes, dust, and the rustle of old magazines. One evening, her mother Emily heard laughter from the basement, faint, musical, like someone telling stories. She went down and froze. Claire sat on the floor, the doll before her. Labubu's head slightly tilted, arms on her knees. "She's my friend," the girl said. Emily decided the doll must have belonged to previous tenants. Labubu appeared old but harmless. She placed her on Claire's shelf. Interest did not fade. Each night, Emily heard her daughter whispering to someone, laughing, crying. When she entered the room, Claire pretended to sleep. The doll was always beside her. On the 4th day, Emily noticed a faint scent of smoke emanating from the doll. She tried to take it. Claire screamed. "No! She gets angry when you touch her." That night, Emily awoke to rustling from the hallway. Cold air pulled at her. Peeking into Claire's room, she froze. Claire sat on the bed. Labubu was standing on her thin little legs and moving. The head turned slowly, a soft hiss emanating from her mouth. Claire nodded, understanding. Emily screamed, ran forward, grabbed the child, yanked the doll away. Claire let out a short, glassy scream. The doll fell, and for a moment, her eyes shone with life. The next morning, Emily burned Labubu in the fireplace. Flames surged, but instead of smoke, a cold draft filled the room. The fire did not touch the doll. Only the eyes darkened, slowly, like being swallowed by shadow. Then a face appeared in the flames. A child's face, charred but alive, staring at Emily. Emily took Claire to her grandmother and called a paranormal researcher, Thomas. Her husband laughed, but she insisted. Thomas examined the doll. When Emily brought it out, the doll's face was blackened, but intact. Thomas stiffened. "This is Morrow's work," he said. He didn't just craft dolls, he performed rituals, using items of deceased children to hold their presence. "He succeeded?" Emily whispered. Thomas shook his head. "There are 6. 5 destroyed. This one seems to be the last." He took a small talisman and recited an Old English prayer. The air thickened, the lamp flickered. Labubu stood on the table. First still, then her eyes stirred, alive. Thomas paled. "She doesn't want to leave. Her call draws her back." A whisper came, "She remembers faces." The doll fell. When Thomas picked her up, the eyes were empty holes. 3 days later, Emily got a call. Thomas found dead in his car, holding the doll. Tiny handprints pressed into the glass inside. 2 months later, the house sold to a new family. Emily and her husband left. Claire almost stopped speaking. Occasionally, she whispered in her sleep. She didn't leave. 6 months later, a newspaper reported an exhibit doll of unknown origin disappeared from a Portland University lab. Surveillance showed no movement. Tiny footprints led to the door. The next summer, a collector in Chicago bought a strange doll from an antique shop. The seller claimed it was an old Japanese designer series. The doll had a cracked face, a mark on the back of her head. Morrow number 6. The collector placed her on a shelf. At night, security cameras recorded the doll slowly turning toward the display window. In the glass reflection stood a little girl with a face like Labubu's. She smiled and whispered, "You brought me home."